Okay, so I think that it's time to start our seminar. And it is a great pleasure for me to welcome all of you to the open session of the Committee on Demographic Studies of the Polish Academy of Sciences. Today, we have a special occasion to meet, which is the celebration of the World Population Day. But however, before we proceed to the main topic, I would like to inform all the participants that today's session is being recorded and additionally broadcast live on the YouTube of the channel of the Poznań University of Economics and Business. And therefore, I kindly ask all those who consent to having their image shared speak up. Otherwise, please ask your questions on the chat or contact the seminar organizers directly. Well, contact details are available on the website of the university and on the website of the Committee of Demographic Studies of the Polish Academy of Sciences. And now, having covered these legally required formalities, let me move to the main topic. Well, since 1989, World Population Day has been celebrated on the 11th of July. It was established by the UN General Assembly on the initiative of the Governing Council of the United Nations Development Programme. And the inspiration for its creation was public interest in 5 Billion Day, which took place on the 11th of July, 1987, the approximate date on which the world's population reached 5 billion people. On this day, the UN Population Division also announces a revision of its population projections. World Population Prospects 2024 is the 28th edition of the official United Nations Population Estimates and Projections. It presents population estimates from 1950s to the present for 237 countries or areas, underpinned by analysis of historical demographic trends. The 2024 revision also presents population projections to the year 2100 that reflect a range of plausible outcomes at the global, regional, and national levels. And at this moment, I would like to warmly welcome our keynote speaker, Professor Dawn Wilmos, Director of the UN Population Division, who has agreed to present the results of this year's revision. It is a great honor for us that Professor Wilmos has found time to join our session and participate in our discussion. I would like also to welcome Dr. Caroline Schmidt, who is a researcher, demographer, and currently serves as the chief of the Population Outreach and Support Unit at the United Nations Population Division. Caroline, thank you very much for being with us and for your invaluable help in preparing today's seminar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our seminar program also includes comments prepared by experts from among the members of the Committee on Demographic Studies, who simultaneously represent the most important demographic research centers in Poland. Well, thanks a lot for your contribution. And now, please allow me to briefly introduce our keynote speaker. Professor Dawn Wilmos has been director of the United Nations Population Division within the Department of Economic and Social Affairs since 2013. He began his career in 1990 by teaching and conducting research at the University of California in Berkeley. Mr. Wilmos was professor at the University of California through 2014, and now is Professor Emeritus in Berkeley's Department of Demography. He is the author and co-author of more than 50 scientific papers on various aspects on population dynamics. He was engaged as a consultant by the World Health Organization and the World Bank to lead the development of new maternal mortality estimates for the global monitoring of the Millennium Development Goals. He has also served on several expert panels convened by US government or National Academy of Sciences. We are more than happy to host Professor Wilmos together with us. And now let's move on to answering the questions that concern all of us. What is the current population of the world, Europe, and Poland? And what will it be in 2100? I would like to ask Professor Wilmos to present the World Population Prospects 2024. Professor Wilmos, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I'm going to try and share my screen here so you can see the presentation. Hopefully this works again.
Yes.
And now we just need to go to full screen, right?
Yes, okay. Perfect.
Very good. All right, thank you very much. It's an honor to join your seminar today. And can I just clarify, is it just the people who are in this Zoom that I see in the Zoom? This is just the committee on population sciences that's attending?
Well, majority is the Committee on Demographic Studies of the Academy of Sciences, but these are also people from our university, from different universities, because we wanted to share this information on the seminar in the units at which we work. And these are also people from the Statistics Poland, whom we also asked to join the seminar because they are the people who presented and prepared the population projection presented by Statistics Poland.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And we also have people from the demography unit of the Warsaw School of Economics, and I also see Kuba Bijak from Southampton. So, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm also joined by some colleagues from the Population Division. You already mentioned Carolina Schmidt, who's online, but I also see my colleague Stephen Kisambira and Patrick Gerland is also online. There may be others who have joined that I haven't seen. I'm going to ask them, especially Patrick, to help with some of the specific questions that you may have about Poland and Ukraine. I understand that's one focus of the discussion here. So I have a few slides on those at the end, but then we will also have others who can contribute to the discussion if you want more detail. So the world population prospects, these are the global population estimates and projections that the United Nations has been producing since 1951. And normally these are updated every 2 years, or at least in recent decades, it's been every 2 years. However, sometimes it's been 3 years, or during the pandemic, for example, we went from 2019 to 2022. We had a 3-year interval because we needed more time to figure out what to do with COVID and also to rebuild the system at that point. And now we're back onto even years. And the WPP 2024 is the 28th edition of these estimates and projections from the UN. Now, these data, together with the data from the World Urbanization Prospects, they account for, they're used for about 1/4 of the indicators that are used for the global monitoring of progress towards the SDGs. That's to say that they're either used as the denominators of a rate to compute the rate, to actually compute the indicator itself, or they're used as weights for determining regional and global values of the national, adding up the national indicators. The data are produced by a single year of age and calendar year. This is ever since the 2022 edition of these estimates and projections. That we've had these by single years of age and single calendar years, or what we call the 1-by-1 configuration. And these estimates then go from 1950 to 2024 and projections from 2025 going forward. They refer to 237 countries and areas of the world. Those are the 193 member states of the United Nations, plus some other states, and a lot of territories. Overseas territories of countries are presented separately, That's partly so they can be combined with the region where they are located for regional analysis, but also because the data systems are often separate for overseas territories. So in total, there are 237 countries and areas included in the analysis, and those together comprise the total population of the world. And to do this work, we rely on information from censuses and sample surveys. There were more than 1,900 censuses used for this work, and nearly 3,200 sample surveys, as well as information from civil registration and vital statistics systems for 169 countries. The analysis is based fundamentally on the theory of the demographic transition, or the model of the demographic transition, we might say, which, as I'm sure you're all familiar, is the story about the decline of the death rate, followed by the decline of the birth rate, and a period of rapid population growth in between. And that growth continues until the fertility rate falls low enough that it closes the gap between the death rate and the birth rate. And when the transition is complete, that's to say, when fertility has fallen enough that it closes the gap with the death rate, then the population size may stabilize with a growth rate close to zero. However, in many cases, we've observed that the population at that point may decline in size and with a negative growth rate. And that's actually become, I think demographers expected the first model, the first stabilization would be the outcome after the demographic transition. But what we're observing more, in fact, is that this pattern of decline following the conclusion of the transition. So the world population continues to grow, even though many countries have gone into decline. The world as a whole continues to grow. And the current projections indicate that it may peak in the mid-2080s. So the current population of the world is estimated at 8.2 billion people. And we expect it to continue growing. And in the 2080s, we expect it to reach a peak around 10.3 billion people. And then after that, of course, there's more and more uncertainty about what will happen. But we expect that at the world level, there may be a slight decline after it reaches a peak, so that the total would fall to around 10.2 billion people in 2100. But this is roughly stability of the global population at that point, with a slight decline, at least appearing to set in at that point. So for this analysis, for this edition of the World Population Prospects, we decided to focus the analysis on three groups of countries, countries and areas. We divide the 237 countries and areas of the world into three groups. And this is presented in the report, the summary of results of the WPP. We divide the world into these three groups according to whether the country has already peaked in population size, whether it's projected to peak in the next 30 years, or whether it's expected to still be growing in 30 years. So you have these three groups, and I'm going to turn now, you see here what the projections are for the total population of each of those three groups. Obviously, the one that continues growing for the next 30 years continues to get larger. The one that has already peaked by 2024 is declining, and the one that is expected to peak within the next 30 years, the population remains more or less flat for that one over this time period. And in each case, we present the uncertainty or the prediction intervals, they're called. They're an expression of the uncertainty around the projections. These are the colored bands that surround each of the main trends. And those represent 95% prediction intervals, meaning that our expectation is that we're 95% certain that the result, the actual result would lie within that band. So focusing first on the countries whose populations have already peaked by 2024, there are 63 countries and areas in this group. They contain around 28% of the global population today. Of course, that share will decline over time because this group is declining. And the population has already reached a peak during or before 2024. I think during 2024 is the example is Germany. I believe it reached its peak. It's reaching its peak in the current year. But for these others, they've reached the peak slightly before that. The total population of this group then is projected to decline by 14% over the next 30 years. So here you see some examples: China, Japan, Germany, the Russian Federation. So mostly countries in Eastern Asia or Europe, obviously. And the decline, if you look at, the declines are quite severe for some of the countries, in particular for China and Japan. And here we see the countries that are projected to peak between 2025 and 2054. There are 48 countries and areas in this group, with 10% of the global population today. And the population of this group as a whole is projected to increase by 5% over the next 30 years. So just a slight change. But you can see there are some large populations in this group as well, although although this group is the smallest of the three. It includes Brazil, Iran, Turkey, Vietnam, and several others. The third group, consisting of countries whose population will continue growing through 2054. This includes 126 countries and areas with almost 2/3 of today's global population. And this group is expected to increase in size by almost 38% over the next 30 years. And in fact, 9 countries in this group will see their populations double in size by 2054 over the next 30 years. These include Angola, Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. I believe that all 9 are countries in sub-Saharan Africa, although Patrick can correct that later if it's not correct. But most of those countries, in any case, are in sub-Saharan Africa, the ones that are growing really very rapidly. And the countries in this case continuing to grow through 2054, they include prominently very large countries: India, Indonesia, Nigeria, and the United States. These are 4 of the largest countries, as you all know, and they will continue growing. They're expected to continue growing. An important point is that this group, basically, there are 2 different models, you could say, or 2 different types. One, it consists of countries that still have high levels of fertility, or where fertility has declined more recently, and that are still growing rapidly because of the excess of births over deaths. Whether it's momentum from past growth or whether it's continuing high levels of fertility, it's driven by what is often called natural increase. There's another group of countries within this group, there's a subgroup within this group, consisting of countries that have relatively high levels of immigration, and where future growth will be driven mostly or even exclusively by immigration. And the example here in this graph is for the United States of America, where we anticipate that the growth may continue throughout the current century. So we really can't even say that all of these countries will peak in size. We don't know, but I think we wanted to assume that, but as we reflected on it more, we have to say we really don't know whether each country individually will eventually reach a peak size. For most of them, that appears to be true, but there might be a group of high immigration countries where that never happens, or at least not within the next 100 years. So with few exceptions, we expect the demographic transition towards longer lives and smaller families to continue. Here we show the trends in a summary fashion for those 3 groups of countries and for the world as a whole. If you focus first on the one on life expectancy at birth, it's a little simpler to read because you'll go from the dark blue to the light blue, and that progression is increasing life expectancy for all groups of countries and for the world as a whole. We anticipate that life expectancy will continue increasing gradually over this time period. For fertility, it's slightly more complicated. You see in general, for most of for two of the groups and for the world as a whole, you see a kind of continuous pattern of decline going from the dark blue to the light blue. But for the group the group of countries where the population has already peaked by 2024, then you see that it's a little more complicated, and there's an expectation that there will be a continued decline of fertility overall for the next. Well, no, I take that back. The decline was between 1995 and 2024, and then it's projected for the future, both for the next 30 years and then beyond that, that there may be some at least slight rebound in the level of fertility. So this is what we're assuming for countries with very low levels of fertility. We are assuming that there will be at least a modest rebound in the level of fertility, not to bring it back up to 2.1, the replacement level, but possibly to bring it up to around 1.4, 1.5. And this is based on the pattern that has been observed in countries that have had very low levels of fertility for a longer period of time. This has been observed, this pattern of a rebound. But of course, we're still learning about that and trying to understand what happens in these situations of ultra low fertility, as it's often called. So you may be wondering, the world has been wondering, I think, about what happened to life expectancy during the pandemic. And previously, we had estimated in the 2022 edition of the World Population Prospects, we had estimated that life expectancy at birth fell by 1.8 years globally during the pandemic. And that's reflected here in the, I guess that's an olive colored line, is green, olive green, I guess. It fell during 2020 and 2021, and then rebounded in 22 and 23. Overall, we expect that life expectancy will continue to increase. It increased by 8.4 years from 1995 until today, and we project a further increase of another 4.1 years over the next 30 years. And these rising levels of life expectancy are expected to contribute to population growth or to help mitigate population decline in almost all countries over the next few decades. So for some populations, this kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier about the third group, and those where population growth is in many cases driven by migration, or mostly by migration. Here you see the total population with the projection, the medium scenario projection, which is the dark dashed line. And then you see the uncertainty band, the usual 95% prediction intervals around that central projection. And then you see another line added here, which is a little bit lighter, and it's a dashed dotted line, dashes and dots together. And what you notice is that line is, well, that's a no migration scenario, zero migration scenario. It's not no migration, it's zero migration. There could be migration, but as long as the immigrants balance with the immigrants, it would be zero migration. So assuming zero migration every year going forward, then you would see that these countries would have a pattern that is much like the others, in that they would be peaking within the next 30 years and starting to decline. I guess Saudi Arabia might still be growing in 30 years, but the others, I believe, from the graph, would all reach a peak and start to decline within the next 30 years, were it not for migration. And it's interesting that in each case, the no migration, zero migration scenario lies almost within or almost within the 95% uncertainty range, but really at the very low end of that range. And so there are 52 countries and areas where immigration is projected to be the main driver of population growth through 2054. And these include those that are shown here, obviously. But then there's another group of countries where emigration, out-migration, is expected to contribute to population decline through 2054. And there are 14 such countries that have low fertility. I mean, there are more countries where there's net out-migration, but there are 14 in particular that have low levels of fertility today, and also where we expect a population loss through out-migration over the next 30 years. Some of these are countries in the Caribbean. Some of the small island developing states fall into this group, like Jamaica has very low levels of fertility and also high levels of out-migration. And so there's population loss from both the balance of births and deaths and from out-migration. Population is growing older. We all know this. Population aging, it's the way of the future. Globally, the number of persons aged 65 years and or older is projected to surpass the number of children under age 18 by the late 2070s. Already by the mid-2030s, the number of persons aged 80 or above is projected to surpass the number of infants under age 1. And even in countries with rapid population growth and relatively youthful populations, the number of persons aged 65 or older is already increasing. So you can see this, for example, if you look at for the populations that are growing through 2054 in the bottom right-hand corner, you see that for those 65 and older, that age group is already increasing, and we expect that it will continue to increase. Of course, it's maybe not increasing so much. It's not increasing as a percentage of the population yet, but it is increasing in absolute numbers, and eventually it will increase as a percentage of the population as the fertility comes down and the other age groups stop increasing as much. Population momentum is a very important part of this story. I'm sure you're familiar with it. If you're a group of demographers, I don't have to explain population momentum. That's a pleasure, because normally I have to try and explain it, and it's very difficult to help people to understand. But population momentum or age structure, a young age structure is conducive to growth, and older age structure is conducive to decline. But population momentum, or the impact of age structure, is projected to contribute 80% of the total growth for the world over the next 30 years. So, the total increase, the percentage increase here, it looks a total of about 21%, but 17% of that is going to be due to momentum. And that's just to say that the current youthful age structure of the global population will continue to drive growth, even if fertility fell immediately to the replacement level. So for 88 of the 126 countries and areas whose populations are projected to continue growing, so focusing on those that are continuing to grow, population momentum is expected to be the main driver of population growth. And you can see that here for it's labeled as Group C. And you see that the total growth is almost 40% and about 27%. There would be about a 27% increase just due to momentum, due to the young youthful age structure. Some populations now have an age distribution that is significantly older in the past, and they're beginning to experience negative momentum. Just like a youthful age structure drives growth, an older age structure will slow down growth. So here we move into, I have a few slides for Poland and Ukraine. I understand that you want to have a more focused concentration on these conversation, a more focused conversation about these two countries and the assumptions that were used. And here I'm just showing you, I'll show you 3 graphs for the total population and the fertility and the mortality. And we can talk about the migration as well. But total population, the projections are for these two countries, they're both currently around 38 million people, 38.5 for Poland, 37.9 million for the Ukraine. And it's projected that they will fall, the population size will fall continuously over the decades to come. And the Polish population is projected to be cut in half and to reach around 19.2 million in 2100. Ukraine, I'm not sure, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but the total population is decreasing, and I'm sorry, I can't find the actual number, but you can read it off the graph, I suppose. It looks like it's about down to about 15 million by the end of the century. So it's even a more precipitous decline than for Poland. But of course, there's quite a bit of uncertainty around those estimates. For example, for Poland, the 95% prediction interval in 2100 ranges from 11.5 to 28.5 million. So quite a range of uncertainty when you get out that far into the future. Total fertility, here we show it for each of the two countries, and we show the prediction intervals, and we also compare to Eastern Europe as a whole and to Europe as a whole. The fertility rates for Poland are quite consistent with the rest of Europe, the rest of Eastern Europe, and the rest of Europe. For Ukraine, they're quite a bit below, although I think there's enormous uncertainty around that given the current political situation in Ukraine in particular. But as here you see also an example of what I was saying earlier, this modest rebound in the level of fertility that's assumed. So for Poland, it will go up from about where it's 1.3 or so right now up to about 1.5. And for Ukraine, also, it will go up from around 1.0 to maybe 1.3, according to these projections. Life expectancy in the two countries, it's expected that it will continue to increase for both men and women. For Poland, I guess it's increasing a little bit more than for Ukraine, or maybe starting at a higher level. In any case, the levels are slightly higher for Poland than for Ukraine, and there's a much larger sex gap for Ukraine. And I believe that concludes my slides. We're happy to talk about more of the issues that you would like to discuss, but I turn it back to you.
Sorry. Thank you very much, John, for your well, impressive presentation, and the results of the world population prospects presenting such a great diversity of different world trends. We are really impressed by the amount of work, and we are aware also of the complexity of the problem, of the projection for the entire world in face of such diverse trends. Well, of course, as you mentioned, there were also zero migration projections, but we know that such assumption would be unrealistic. So the assumptions about migration are really a challenge. And since we are a country experiencing a transition in this respect, at first I asked my colleagues who are experts in the field of migration to present some comments as concerns migration. So Paweł and Agnieszka, please present your comments.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a real privilege to be part of the seminar. I will just open my file. I just want to check if you can just see
yes,
our
everything
slides.
is okay.
Yeah, perfect. So this is just a joint comment prepared by Agnieszka Pichel and myself. We just decided that I would just start with this introduction, but Agnieszka is with us, so we are ready to discuss what is necessary then in the discussion round. So what our aim here is just to look at how migration is being tackled in the world population prospects. And maybe we'll just to take somehow broader perspective, but at some point, as you will see, we'll focus on what has been already somehow announced on two cases we know quite well. And let me start with just a few truly basic issues. So first of all, we are fully aware that what are the aims of world population prospects, and we are aware that in fact the main idea is just to look at population dynamics and natural increase, and this is to a large extent also due to data limitations. This is one of the reasons why, for example, migration often is treated as a residual only. Second, we also are aware that migration is the demographic phenomenon that is the most difficult to be predicted. And this is also clearly stated in the document we are discussing today. So we are absolutely aware of it. And this is also what is common knowledge among people who are working on migration. But I would like to use this opportunity to say maybe a few words about recent advances. And we are happy enough today that Jakub Bijak also joined the seminar. And we had the opportunity to discuss some of the results of his project, Quantmic project, a year and 2 years back. There are also more projects looking at the migration from the global perspective. So I mentioned Quantmic, but there's also Hummingbird project. So they are just trying maybe to add some new developments into this area. So they are looking at how we could assess uncertainty. By the way, Bayesian methods, they are also used in world population prospects, and this is clearly stated in the methodological guidelines. What is developing very quickly, they are early warning systems. And you know, the large part of studies looking at how big data can be used, how digital traces can be used, and first of all, how can we triangulate various modes of data. So they are really quite substantial advances in the area, at least from our perspective, but of course, there are still numerous pitfalls. And what we know for sure that estimating migration in the long run is a truly difficult issue. And from our perspective as migration scholars, we could add maybe 2 points, and we'll refer to this later on. So first of all is the issue of fluidity of migration or mobility forms. And secondly, how we could link migration with other population processes, and first of all, with fertility. And it has been said already that, in fact, in the case of such enormous endeavor as world population prospects, there's a key role of assumptions. So against the background, we are not going to challenge those assumptions or discuss those assumptions. In fact, what we wanted to do is just to focus on 2 cases we know relatively well, and we would just like to use those cases just to flag some methodological issues. They, in our opinion, are somehow worth discussing. So what I will do right now, within a few minutes, I might just present those 2 cases, and then finalize our intervention with 2 or maybe more questions about future challenges. And let me start with the basic case, is the case of Poland, and of course, net migration. So this is just our elaboration based on the data we got. And of course, we know already that one of the issues, and this is what has been discussed already in the introductory presentation, is that what we are looking at here is just net migration. So that's clear. But if you look at the data for Poland, they are apparently more issues. So for example, if you just look at this period, apparently what we see, this is just the outcome of where the data on migration comes from, and this is mostly, of course, registered data. Then we have something strange. This is just the peak after 2010, and this is the outcome of how the registered data have been somehow tempered with the use of the population census data. And then, of course, the most recent phenomena, truly important, this is the influx of people under temporary protection, people from Ukraine, and then expected outflow starting from 2025. In fact, it should be around 60% of the inflow. This is at least what is assumed. And then, interestingly enough, if you just take a look at this part, what is assumed that is just a continuous, very low level of net migration. Again, interestingly enough, negative net migration. I will not comment on demographic indicators because this is, I assume, what my colleagues will do just in a second. But I would just like to draw your attention to this graph on your right-hand side when you're just looking at rates and net migration rates, of course. So apparently, what is happening in the case of Poland, they are just this 3 peaks. The first one, it was I mentioned, is for 2010. Then we have 2022. Then, of course, this is just the starting of the war in Ukraine, and then expected return of war refugees from Ukraine. And I said, then very stagnant, close to zero net migration. So this is the case of Poland. Sorry for this. The next is Ukraine. And this one, in fact, is far more interesting even, because what we see here is, first of all, the first episode, it's just related to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Then almost nothing is happening according to registered data, despite, of course, the fact that we know that was quite massive, but circular or temporal mobility. And then the huge flight related to the war, estimated to be approximately 6 million. And then, and this is quite important in the context of this cortex of this projection, is just expected return migration of approximately, let's say, half of the total. And then again, if we just take a look at this part, almost nothing is happening. So then, if we just again go back to demographic indicators, what is really interesting from our perspective, we would be happy to learn maybe more about it. This is just the assumption concerning not the fact how refugees and how migrants are being treated in the projection, but in fact, what kind of age structure have been imputed here. Because in the case of this particular process, what has been imputed is just more or less equal gender structure of also the recent outflows. And of course, this is not true as we know very well, because in the case of the war-related outflow, the share of women is just approximately 80%. So why should it be important? Because, for example, if you just take a look at this process here, the question is how and to what extent should we somehow try to link what is happening right now in terms of migration to the future fertility trends in Ukraine. And by the way, this is what we at the Center of Migration Research just trying to do research-wise. Few comments based on those two cases I just presented. And again, I've just emphasized intentionally we decided to focus not on the whole projection, but just two cases. So first of all, we know very well that data used for forecasting or projections, they are based on registers on censuses. And we know very well that this kind of data cannot capture the complexity and dynamics of migration processes. The question is to what extent it's needed for forecasting, possibly not, but we need to be aware that in fact, sometimes it can be very important. Just to give you one case, for example, in the case of Poland, since around 2018, we observed a gradual change from temporary migration towards settlement migration. So process with expected also impact on demographic dynamics. So of course, this is what you will not see clearly in the registered data. The second point is related to data artifacts, and those data I somehow commented on. To a large extent, those artifacts, they can result from comparing registered data with national censuses. And this was the peak you saw, for example, for 2010. Just for your information, nothing serious happened. Of course, in 2010, for example, in the case of Poland, there were no massive returns. In fact, the biggest dynamics of migration, of the post-enlargement migration, was happening in the post-2004 period. And here the question are, first of all, to what extent this kind of data artifacts are important for forecasting? I would assume maybe not. But there is another point, and I guess this is what we discussed with Agnieszka also yesterday, because we need to be aware also that there is a potential risk of misuse of the data, because we know very well that, for example, students or researchers, they very often use the data, and unfortunately, this kind of data can be quite misleading. And the final point is just about how migration processes are modeled, or rather not modeled. And again, this is what we know very well. This is what results directly from the assumptions. However, as I just tried to comment, it creates some serious challenges. And let me just stop for a second again on the case of Ukraine. If we just consider very strong outflow as a result of the war, and also very skewed gender structure of the population of war migrants, I personally, so we would expect quite substantial impact on what will happen in the future. So let us just stop here with maybe two questions or postulate. And the question is, if generally, are we able to include migration component in this kind of population projections in such a way which could use a wide range of knowledge on migration, including our knowledge on population and migration dynamics, perpetuation of migration, this kind of quite important issues. And the question is it generally possible to do it for such an endeavor as World Population Prospect, which is meant to be focusing on the whole globe and also on a very long time span? So the question is it generally possible? And if yes, what steps could be taken just to achieve it? And the second question, maybe far more important, is how, so what we should do in order to better link migration to other population processes. And again, from our perspective, it's not that much about Poland, but particularly about the case of Ukraine and how we look at the future population prospects for this country suffering war right now. So that's all from our side, and I'm just stopping here. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Paweł, for preparing the comment, and thanks for drawing attention to the challenges and assumptions regarding migration. Well, if I noticed correctly, you highlighted there were 3 peaks and 5 periods, but well, thanks for taking into account the complexity of the problem, assumptions, risk, and data. And for formulating the questions, I think that, well, sorry for those who want to take part in the discussion. Discussion will be after the next 2 comments, because I see that several people would like to join the discussion, but not at this moment. Now I would like to ask Paweł Strzelecki for present his comment, comparing the population projections prepared by different institutions. This is Statistics Poland, Eurostat, and of course, World Population Prospects 2024. And afterwards, there will be also other comments before the discussion. Well, Paweł, if you could switch into the now it is the full screen option. Thanks a lot. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope that everything is okay with the microphone and presentation. I'm very honored to have the opportunity to comment this round of the United Nations population projections. For me personally, and I think for the demographers, it is also a special moment when the world population projections are published, are released, because it is a benchmark for our work. So in fact, we also have many questions and comments, and that's why I'm happy to be here. In fact, every population projections, especially new one, contains a new information that is included and give something new in comparison to the previous population projections. And in fact, in my presentation, I will focus mainly on the comparisons of these population projections to the previous one, asking myself what important has changed and what the new information is there that we haven't that was not known before. And in fact, this is the aim of my presentation. In fact, to stress these differences, these main questions here, at least from my perspective, that can be useful in explaining better what are the results and in creating a story that explains better why this projection is different from the previous one, and what has changed, what we know better than before, or maybe something should be added as well. So because of the time constraints, I'm going to start directly from the three main issues that I've noticed can be the most important when we compare the world population prospects 2024 with the previous exercise and with other population projections. So basically, these are the three that you will see on the slides. First of all, there is a much lower refugee migration that peak, at least that we see in the main population projection in this median variant. So I think it's a very important observation, and in fact, following the comment of my colleagues, for me, it's quite surprising that this relatively neutral influence of migration is also predicted for the even far future. So if we compare the population projections 2024 to the previous projections that we know, in fact, we are close to lower bound of the 95% confidence interval of the previous projection. And okay, my question is, of course, what are the reasons? And that can be, of course, it can be used to explain better what is the story behind that, especially even if we focus not on 100 years, but even the period until 2050, the difference is about 2 million people until then. So I think it's quite substantial. And of course, once again, what about the long-term migration assumptions? Why we are as a country that is far more developed than in the past, not attracting more migration. So probably it is about maybe the use of the kind of economic variables in the population projections, like it is used, for example, in the there are some attempts to use it in the Eurostat population projections. And of course, one of the main concerns is about lower total fertility rate. And in fact, in the new population projection, there is a 0.1 lower total fertility rate in the entire population projection for Poland. And okay, even the comments for Poland, I think, are more than enough for 10 minutes. So okay, let me just illustrate these main points by the next slides. Okay, so if we compare the United Nations population projection now and before, of course, we can notice that first of all, this migration peak that was, I think, assumed just after the beginning of the war in 2022, when many millions of refugees from Ukraine came to Poland, and there was a huge uncertainty what is going to happen next. In fact, it was included in the previous projection. Now, I think it is not included. However, my obvious question is why this uncertainty is not included also in the starting point of the projection. But okay, that's maybe a technical reason. So that's the first point. The second point, as I said, is that in fact the medium scenario of the projection that is presented now is very close to the lower bound of this projection from the past. So after 2 years, in fact, we have noticed that something really important has in fact was observed, that we are very far away from the previous median scenario. Okay, so I was a bit curious. What about the side of the sending country in terms of migration? And in fact, it is not So clear if that this assumption was about migration possibly is reflected in the population projections for the Ukraine. So maybe this is about okay. My conclusion is maybe this is about the Polish population that was influenced by some factors that can be. That can explain why there is a difference between this population projection now that is in color red here, and previous population projection that is this yellow color here. And okay, in comparison to the population projections of the Eurostat, for example, that okay, we can discuss if the assumptions about the long-term migration are in fact maybe too optimistic, but in fact this higher fertility and also higher net migration scenario for Europe of 2023, I think gives the more optimistic view about at least the total population. About the population of our of Statistics Poland, I think it's quite close, in fact, to what is observed in the work in the population projections from 2024. So in fact, maybe there is a similarity in the assumptions here, especially about migration. Okay, but I think what is very interesting is from what starting point we in fact begin our projections, and in fact, as you can see here, the starting point for the population after pandemic was a bit lower than it was before the pandemic, and in fact what the whole change is in 2022, 2023. Of course, there is a huge uncertainty about the size of the population and the migration flow in this period of time. So once again, I think it would be maybe a good idea to include also this uncertainty, possible uncertainty in the beginning, in the estimates of the nowcasting of the population as well in the population projection. But I don't know if it is possible, of course. Okay, so the third point about the fertility level, and in fact, from the United Nations estimates, we see that the fertility, total fertility rate in Poland is declining from this, in fact, relatively low level. It is assumed that it will be the increase, the kind of recovery in the future. However, we are not certain to what extent. Of course, the obvious question is: are there any research or maybe the phenomena that you are using as the kind of explanation why there is such a difference between the previous population projections and current population projections, maybe not in this short period of time in which, in fact, this fluctuation is important, but also in the very long period of time. So in the time in which these fluctuations probably should not be extended to such a very long time horizon. Okay, so in fact, that's all that I wanted to show you. There are 3 questions to be, I think, to take away from this presentation. First of all, what are the changes, in fact, in this very close horizon between the previous population projection and the current population projections? Is it only the influence of the population estimates, or is it also about the definition of the de facto population, or maybe the quality of the data that was used before? I don't know. In fact, that is my question. Are there any changes also concerning the counting of war refugees, and what is the data source that is in fact source of the assumptions here. And in fact, my third question is, what are the reasons for significantly lower fertility in the long time horizon? Is it about the, for example, childlessness of the younger generations, or maybe some proofs of the ineffectiveness of the family policies around the world that are pronatalistic? Okay, so thank you very much for your attention, and if you can answer that question, I will be happy, and I hope that my presentation will be also helpful for you. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Paweł, for your comment, and thank you for putting attention not only to migration, to impact of migration, but also to data, to the definition of the population, the estimates, and of course, fertility, the assumptions. Well, yesterday, the Statistics Poland issued an infographic on the occasion of the World Population Day, and the information was that in the last year, 2023, the TFR in Poland was 1.16. Well, so the assumptions are probably too optimistic even. Well, the last person I've asked for prepared a comment on the population aging as a consequence of the development of population development, not only in Poland, but also in the countries of our region, is Professor Agnieszka Chojna-Minczak, whom I would like to present her comments.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Can you see my presentation right now?
Yes, old age dependency rate.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to focus on the consequences of population aging. As John mentioned, the share of people 65 plus in the population will be increasing, especially in the countries with advanced demographic changes that include Central and Eastern Europe. And using the median scenario, I estimated the old age dependency rate developments in the Central and Eastern European countries. So this is Ukraine and Poland, but also Latvia, Lithuania, Croatia, Estonia, Slovakia, Romania, Slovenia, Bulgaria, and Czechia. The results are presented here. And I wanted to point out to your attention that we will observe not only the increase of the people aged 65 plus, the share of the number of people aged 65 plus and their share in the population, but also the relation between those that are in the age 65 plus and those who are in the productive age. And I used here the 25 and 64 age brackets, and the results are quite, and it is an important warning signal. So what we can see here is that particularly in the Ukraine and Poland, so the countries that were already mentioned a couple of times in the comments, we will observe that by 2050, the old age dependency rate, and this is basically across the board of all the countries, will exceed 50 or even 60 in some countries. But, and this is a huge warning signal, by 2100, we will see that the number of people aged 65 plus will be almost equal to the number of people in the working age, particularly in Ukraine, Poland, and Lithuania. So this shows that the extent of the population aging, but also capacity of the countries that to sustain the welfare system, sustain the way the transfers are organized, but also the labor market's capacity to support old age pension systems, but also other systems, long-term care. become more and more questionable. I also wanted to point out to the sort of the other end where we have Bulgaria and Czechia. So we see that between 2050 and 2100, the change in the dependency rate will be much smaller, which is a result of different assumptions and different developments when we look at the fertility rate. So Czechia is a country that currently has one of the highest fertility rates among the Central and Eastern European countries. So sort of takeaway messages is that the pace of the population aging in Central and Eastern Europe is unprecedented, and we have to be worried about it, not only as demographers, but also as people who provide recommendations or provide advice to the policymakers. Fertility matters a lot, not only right now, but very much into the future. And I think that is also what Paweł clearly showed, that assumptions on fertility have this long-term impact on how the population size, but also age structure will look like in the future. And it is really important to take the demography seriously when we think about the future of the welfare state, the future about social policy, the future of the social policy, but also generational contract. And the demographic developments in Central and Eastern Europe will significantly affect the possibility to sustain the existing welfare and the social protection system. So this is not only the population projections are really an important source of reflection that we should convey to the policymakers, especially in the areas of the social protection. So that is from me. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Agnieszka. As far as I remember, the 8 key message of the World Population Prospect said that by the late of 2070s, the global population aged 65 and older is projected to exceed the number of children under 18. And by the mid of 2030, those aged 80 and over will outnumber infants. That's an important remark. Okay, but now I would like to start the discussion. Well, please, who would like to take the floor? Svetlana, you are the first.
Hello, my dear colleagues. I am from Ukraine. I am Ukrainian refugee. My name is Svetlana Chugayevska. I escaped from the war in Ukraine on the second week of my country war, and it was a terrible challenger for me and my family. And now I live in Krakow and have my job at Krakow University, named by Andrzej Frycz-Mędrzewski University, and I am statistician. That's why I have here my new job at the Department of Statistics and Demography. Even from the beginning of the war, I was founded that we have very big indicators from Ukraine of Ukrainian migrants, of Ukrainian migration. Even before the war in 2020s, we have found that nearly each second person who crossed the border from Ukraine to Poland returned to Ukraine. And it was the huge indicators of this migration. And after the beginning of the full-scale war in my country, we saw these huge indicators of Ukrainian migration. I would like to thank to you for your support for Ukrainians and Ukraine, because it's very important for us and very pleasant have such a support from whole in our new homes, in our new home countries. And I wanted to agree with Professor Pavel Kaczmarczyk that is the population of Ukraine, how they will decide to return or to stay in the new places of accommodation. Everything will depend on the war, of course. And according my researches, I organized 2 rounds of poll from Ukrainian refugees here in Poland. I found it that the amount on the first year of the war wanted to return home, and they decided they will home in any way. But after the second year of the war, I have found only my preliminary calculations, because my second round of the poll is continuing, but this indicator became lower, and we have found that the indicators of people who want to stay in the new
Well, I think
became
that
more, and we don't force this research. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. Well, we had an unstable connection, but I understand that there is a great uncertainty as concerns the return to Ukraine for all the migrants. Well, Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. So I would like to reply to the various questions and comments that your colleagues have shared with us about Poland and Ukraine and the new round of population projections that you have presented and discussed. Is that okay to do it now, or you still want to hear more questions?
Yes.
Yes, please do.
So I need to be able to share my screen to illustrate, to show.
Yes, there is a green square at the bottom line. Okay.
I'm trying. Can you see my screen?
Not at the moment, but maybe
there it
we
is.
need to wait. Here it is. But
right.
It is your email, but not your presentation.
We're reading your email, Patrick.
Well, I'm sorry. I have 2 screens. I was not aware that it's showing the other screen. Okay, let's see. What about now? What do you see?
Now we have Poland annual number of immigrants minus emigrants.
All right,
so net migration.
Good.
Okay.
Good. It's interesting that it's showing me the opposite screen than the one I expected. Okay. So just to clarify, with the 2024 revision, what most of the people who have presented so far have focused on the medium scenario projection. The 2024 revision is incorporating for the first time the analytical work done by John Azzoz and Adrian Raftery over the last decade on different attempts to model time series of international net migration. And in this new revision, we are using this method, but because we have switched all the data model to annual time series instead of 5-year periods, for countries like Poland and Ukraine, where you have such extraordinary movement of refugees from one year to the next year, the use of a time series model creates some extra challenge, because you have basically, if in the year that you start the projection, you have these exceptional changes, by default, autoregressive model are going to carry over for the projection period the most recent starting point of the information you have. And obviously, in these cases, we cannot do that. So We, as some of your speakers already mentioned, we have made normative assumptions about partial return of refugees to their home country. And this challenge that you have in mind for Poland and Ukraine is not limited to this region. We have similar challenge for Sudan, similar challenge for various other situations around the world. And historically, at least a substantial share of refugees do go back within a couple of years to their home country. So this is the main update that we did. And yes, we also updated the estimates for the year 2022-23 based on the available data. And what you need to keep in mind is that 2 years ago, when we did the previous revision, the situation that was happening with Ukraine was just unfolding within months that we were publishing the numbers. So most of the information that has been taken into account in 2022 was more assumption-based than real empirical evidences, especially about what and how the situation evolved in 22, 23, 24. So you really need to put things back in perspective that whatever was done in 2022 was more speculative work than empirically informed work, simply because the situation was just unfolding from weeks to weeks. So what I want you to see on those plots is that, yes, we have eventually a medium scenario that maybe is close to zero. But we have a substantial uncertainty with a high variance for the projections in the long run for countries like Poland. The same is true for countries like Ukraine. The problem, of course, with this kind of plot is that the outlier of the last couple of years are squeezing the scale. But if you would zoom in, you would see that we are not predicting an uncertainty of zero. So in terms of the detail of the method, the new methodological report gives much more details about the challenge and the issues of applying this type of statistical method to do projection of international migration, especially when you have this kind of extreme annual fluctuation due to these special situations. In respect to the age pattern of migration, especially of this kind of situations, over the last year, we have published a technical paper with James Reimer and colleagues on modeling international patterns of net migration, taking into account in-migration and out-migration. And so far, we are not publishing the detail by age and sex because all of these are very speculative assumptions. But as an illustration, just for you as a background, here is, for example, the underlying model assumption that we have used for a country like Ukraine in 2026. As you can see, the shape has some age groups where you have people going in one direction and some other age groups where people are going in the other direction. You have eventually differential by sex. This was for Ukraine, similar assumptions for Poland, but the sign of some of those things may be different because the movements are eventually not in the same directions. Another thing to keep in mind in some of the comparison of some of the results is that, yes, a lot of focus, everyone likes to look at one number and to look at the medium scenario. But I would encourage more people to look also at some of the probabilistic summaries, because as you can imagine, when you go so far into the future in the next 3 generations, you should really take into account more the uncertainty of those changes. And that has, for example, in this kind of plot I have with total population for Ukraine and Poland, you can see how eventually those two populations may overlap, in part because of the recent changes in terms of the population dynamics. one other thing I wanted to emphasize, I think it was the second second group of comments related to differences of why do we have such differences of population projection by the end of the century between the two revisions. The main reason has to do with fertility. This is right now I have on my screen the total fertility rate for Poland between the new revision in bold, like a bold purple line, and in a light purple, the 2022 revision of fertility for Poland. And what we have seen from the available data of the recent years is a substantial decline, further decline in level of fertility for Poland. And starting from that lower level, you can see that for the rest of the century, we are basically projecting a systematically lower level of fertility, even if we imply a slight recovery in the long run. It's still, because the starting point is substantially lower, it gets carried for most of the century. And you can see even with the probabilistic uncertainty on the future fertility, the starting point matters a lot. It's not limited to a country like Poland. We have the same story for China. In the case of China, a quarter of a child in the last couple of years create for the rest of the century an implication on the level of fertility and the population by the end of the century. And the same is true for Ukraine. With Ukraine and the conflict period, this is very speculative because the data from the official vital statistics of Ukraine are still not really easily accessible. But the limited evidence that we have been able to see would suggest a fertility decline rather than anything else. And if you have eventually this substantial drop in overall level of fertility, then it gets carried over the rest of the century. And that has massive implication in terms of the future population for those countries. So yes, we may be wrong. And that's why it's important for everyone to look also at the uncertainty. And finally, to wrap up this part of the uncertainty, if I go back to the population plot that I think also the second discussant was showing, with total population, a country like Poland, now you can see for all the population indicators, whether the total population, the different broad age groups, or even the dependency ratios, you can see on those plots actually two types of uncertainty that we have included. A yellow one, a yellowish one that refer actually to the uncertainty only driven by future assumption of fertility and mortality. And then a reddish one, the reddish lines that refer to the uncertainty that take into account uncertainty of fertility, mortality, and migration. Because we have probabilistic migration, if you take into account this extra uncertainty component of for the population dynamic, what you end up seeing for a country like Poland is uncertainty bounds that are even wider, because we are at least on the probabilistic range of uncertainty, we are eventually having some periods where you may have more or less migration than the medium scenario, and the effect eventually accumulates over time. So you can see this wider uncertainty between the 22 and 24 revision. And the 22 revision, it corresponds much more to the yellow bandwidth, yellow orangey bandwidth. And the new revision by default refer to this wider range with the uncertainty of the overall migration fluctuations that we incorporate. That's the main feedback I wanted to provide to the couple of questions. I probably didn't answer to every question or comments that all of you provided. If I forgot to address some of them, please get in touch with us by email, and we'll be happy to have some follow-up exchanges. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Patrick, very much for your comments. And we, of course, are aware as concerns the uncertainty of the prediction, especially in such a long term. And thank you for the possibility for contacting you in email, because I think that not all the questions might be discussed now. But now I would like to ask Jakub Bijak, Kuba, the floor is yours for your comments, probably on migration, as far as I understood.
Thank you. Good morning, John and Patrick. Good afternoon, colleagues. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on this release, and especially on a successful integration of migration uncertainty into projection. I think that this has been yet another milestone on the journey. And you know, I've been listening to this with fascination, especially the results for Poland and Ukraine. They are sobering in many ways, but not entirely unexpected, and I'll tell you why. So, a couple of months ago, we have released, as part of the QuantMeet, which Paweł kindly mentioned, we have released our own scenarios for population of European countries until 2060, and at that point, we thought we are very pessimistic about Poland, because for 2060, we sort of, our baseline scenario was hitting about 29 million. Yours median is 30. So we thought we were, you know, that there must be something wrong there. But when we looked more closely, it seems that it's all, you know, down to some of the reasons that have already been mentioned. First, the jump of population, starting from usual resident population in the census, 37 million, already 1 million down. Total fertility rate going down. This is what will be driving the long-term dynamics, right? We know it since the replacement migration work. Migration can tinker at the edges in the short term, but in the long run, the different assumptions of migration don't matter that much. And actually, when I was listening to that, I opened the very same tabs that Patrick has been showing. But so if you allow me just to go back to them for a moment, I'd like to make a slightly different or similar point, if you will, right? So the uncertainty bound for Poland, right? It looks like 95% interval is between, in relative terms, between -4 and 4 per thousand. So the width is just short of 1%. It looks a lot. Of course, it mops up the errors from the past as the method works. But in relative terms, right, this is just short of 1%. It's not much of a difference to what we see for many other countries, like the US, which is also about 1% in relative terms, right? From -2 to +8. It's in a different place because of the migration, of the long-term immigration history of the US, but it's also of a similar width. And for Ukraine, again, we don't see it well because of the scale, because of the outlier in 22, but the bandwidth seems to be in the same place. So I think what is really happening here is, of course, fertility is driving it, momentum is driving it, migration is modifying it, and the fact that as John and Patrick mentioned, that we are having the uncertainty already integrated also from the migration side in this release gives us much more information as to where things might go further into the future. So I think, you know, I think this is something that if there is, and you know, the many other things Agnieszka mentioned, dependency ratios. Again, our scenarios produced very similar dependency ratios to those that you presented based on the UN results. So in a way, based on the current knowledge, and especially having heard about the TFR of 1.16, you know, it seems that unfortunately, we are on the trajectory. And it's time for the policymakers to sit up and pay attention, but it's a separate discussion, right? But I think what it's also showing is how valuable an exercise it is to have the revisions of projection assumptions every couple of years. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Kuba, for your comments, and well, thanks. for the contribution, for the projection itself. Well, I thought Paweł Strzelecki, do you want to comment or not? At the moment you put, well, Paweł Kaczmarczyk, okay, and Irena, of course, but I thought that you will like to close the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Paweł, please do comment.
May I have maybe sort of naive question to both Patrick and also Jakub, because and I fully agree that's absolutely necessary to look beyond this median scenario and consider the uncertainty, so we're absolutely aware of. But the question is, what should happen in order to move beyond this zero net median scenario in a country like Poland? Because what we observe already for a number of years now in Poland, that apparently the immigration is growing in numbers. This is also what Paweł Strzelecki commented on. And it's no longer temporary migration, it's settlement, the permanent type of migration. So the question, what should happen just to move beyond this point? Also in terms of the median scenario, because you're right, this is what is commonly commented, in fact.
Okay, Patrick, would you like to answer?
Two small comments. One is, I forgot to mention, but it's somewhat documented in our report, but in the context of these global projections that we do, actually the same is true for the past, we do it also for the estimates, because we have to deal with all the countries of the world. Whatever we do for any of the country, at the end, year by year, annually, from 1950 to 2100, when you sum up the migration of all the countries of the world, year by year, it must add to zero. This puts a major constraint that, yes, you can make, if you do something for one country, you can do any assumption you want. When you do all the countries of the world, all this assumption must still make sense across all the countries of the world because, and this is the second part to my answer to this question, is if in a country like Poland, I'm French, as you are aware, in the European context, the challenge is that to have net in migration means those migrants have to come from somewhere. From which countries or which region those migrants come from, and how long are they going to stay? And what are the plausible level of this inflow of migrants that can be sustainable over time? And the answer of these questions are not simple because in the majority of those countries, there is not sustainable long-term past history of welcoming foreign migrants. So beside having very small marginal numbers, I am very interested to hear more from your perspective about how plausible are those assumptions and from where in the world all these migrants, especially because what you need also to remember is the traditional countries of origin are themselves experiencing low or ultra low fertility. And in that case, they may or may not be able to keep supplying historical flows of migrants to the traditional countries. So if you have answer to all those questions, very happy to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely worth discussing. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. Paweł, you wanted to comment.
Yeah, I wanted to join the discussion because this is extremely interesting and important topic. I mean, the value added of this projection done by United Nations is that you have this matrix of transitions between the countries. You treat global migration as the closed system. So at least at the end, we have the zero migration globally. And in fact, this is something that is lacking, for example, in the population projections of the Eurostat, I suppose, because we in fact noticed in the a kind of critique of this population projections, that in fact they expect the migrations from the places that in fact are not mentioned in the projections. In fact, but on the other hand, we have many migration channels that were not existing, in fact, a decade ago. For example, the main channel of migration from Ukraine several years ago was Russia. Nowadays it's Western Europe, Poland, etc. So the world is changing, and in fact, this is very important, but also very difficult to predict. In fact, taking into account all this geopolitics that is changing, etc. So of course, I congratulate that there is at least one projection in which we have this global view, but of course, I'm aware that it is very, very difficult to predict the future. Thank you.
Yes, I would like also to underline that the majority of us are economists, not only demographers. So we understand that the outflow and inflow must balance, and especially in the scale of the whole world, it is too complex, or it is so complex to prepare the assumptions and to prepare such a projection. Well, Kuba, you wanted to add something.
Paweł, great question. What to do to help the assumptions in the future? I think that my first response would be improve data capture for Poland. I'm saying this with my Polish hat on, right? I've
Not
just
only
looked
Poland.
at the 2023 estimates. So what we are having official data telling us that there were 10,000 emigrants and 16,000 immigrants, so a net of plus 6,700. I don't believe it, right? And you don't believe it, and
we don't believe it either.
And this is something
That's right.
unless sort of the model, the assumptions that then are fed through the model are partially only as good as the data that feed in. So.
Well,
so yes,
Paweł
I'll
Kaczmarczyk
rest my
put also
case.
attention to the data. That's very important. Yes, of course. Well, are there any comments? Who would like to add something? So my last request is to Professor Irena Kotowska, just to sum up and conclude this seminar and the discussion on the world population prospects. Irena, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this lively discussion. So I would like not to comment to all these issues raised during the discussion and presentation, which in my opinion confirm how important this type of exercise for us is. But I would like to stress and highly appreciate the new formula of data presentation in this document of summary results of the population projections, because this new framework refers directly to the demographic transition stages of the advancement of different countries and regions in this demographic transition, and also use terms as population momentum, population dividend, demographic dividend to explain what is going on with population changes. In my opinion, it strengthens the position of demographers in explaining these population developments. And I highly value this grouping of countries according to this advancement in demographic transition, and also the way you show to what extent population dividend and fertility, mortality, and migration assumption contribute to changes. It is, in my important, very, very relevant to define, to describe and to explain differences between countries, and to highlight that the demographic transition is common process, but advancement in this process is crucial for understanding this diversity in future changes, but also challenges and opportunities for different countries. So I like this approach because it makes, in my opinion, easier to understand how different would be these policy advices. And to finish this very quick, this very short appreciation and summarizing the discussion, I would say that this idea, the concept of this presentation of results in this book is according to the title of the first chapter. Awareness of population trends is critical for achieving a sustainable future. So thank you for this approach. Congratulations in the way you explain this, I would say, population mechanism of change. And I know that it is not so easy to present in such a clear way how it works. Thank you.
Thank you, Irena. I think that John would like to comment at the end.
Yes, I just would like to give my own appreciation to all of you for this seminar. And I recall that 2 years ago, you also organized a seminar, and it was, I must say, very stimulating for me. And I think for us, I really appreciate the fact that you have put together a substantively interesting review of the work, and that your feedback is, I believe, very useful to us. And I just wanted to thank you for doing that. It's really an excellent seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you for your contribution. And thank you, first of all, John and the staff from the UN Population Division for preparing the World Population Prospect and for such a good presentation of it, not only to us, but also to the whole world. And do believe that there will be some turning point in the social policy to meet the requirements which come from this World Population Prospect for the policy and for all of us. Well, Kuba, do you want to add
I was just clapping. I was just clapping.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay.
And
Thank
also
you.
good to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All the
Thank
best.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Hello.
Dziękuję.